Merkel Media.
What does the goddamn line say, Tony?
Please do not use gendered language.
Then what? I'll be arrested, put in airport jail?
Well, you're going completely sideways, man.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
How dare you?
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
I'm Chris Hansen with Dave on NBC.
Jack Marius Tack-Theratrix.
Hi, I'm Spartacus.
Jackson, Sacramento, he, him.
Steven Seagal.
Sex offender guy.
I'm Keith Morris.
This is Muammar Gaddafi.
I'm Rick James, bitch.
Sorting through the lies.
The hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
We cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
And uncovering the centuries-long plan for world domination.
Learning about Cuba, having some food.
Let's talk about Chinese people.
Have you ever been in a Turkish prison? Swangles in Fort Lauderdale?
I have sent 6 of my Libyan missiles to blow up the Sears hardware department.
Nothing could be more fun than jumping off a cliff with 2 German bisexuals.
Oh, you English are so superior, aren't you? Thank you, comrade.
And now, macroaggressions.
That's what assholes call it.
With your host,
Buddy, I don't know who you are, but you're about to get chlamydia.
Charlie Robinson.
Hey, Whitey, where's your hat?
You want to drop the blame on Charlie and say it's all Charlie's fault.
He was a retard.
I get some goddamn diuretic.
Welcome to Macroaggressions. I'm your host, Charlie Robinson. If you are watching us on Rockfin, Rumble, Band.video, Vigilante.tv, or you are listening wherever podcasts are served, thanks a million. We appreciate the support. Couldn't do it without you. If you want to connect with me, the best way to do that is probably the brand new website, www.macroaggressions.io. You can find the link for that in the description. If you want to connect with me, you can do so there. You can find out info about the social media, books I've written, other podcasts, all that good stuff. Just go to macroaggressions.io and take a look and let me know what you think. Also, big thanks to our sponsors that make the show happen. You can find them also on the website as well. You can go and check out Chemical Free Body. They are making the best batch of supplements out there. They actually work. My God, could you imagine living in a world where the stuff that you're buying actually works? Well, with Tim James and Chemical Free Body, it actually does. So you can go over there and check it out for yourself. Don't just take my word for it. There's a lot of people that have purchased the products and are willing to tell you what they think about it, including myself. I've done the Detox Bundle, not once, but twice. It's a 90-day program. Take a look at it. See what you think over there. It's Green 85. It's gut detox, toxin detox, ultra enzymes, and probiotics. Those are all capsules. Just take a handful of capsules, drink that green drink in the morning, and you are good to go. Do that for 90 days and then come talk to me. Then tell me what your results are. New year, new you, but you got to get involved and you got to make it actually happen. So go to chemicalfreebody.com and use the promo code MACRO on your way out to save some money. And listen, it is 2024 and everything is on the table, including World War III. I'm really hoping that's not the case, but I'll tell you what, EMP Shield is out there. They're building a fantastic shielding device that will work for your house. It will work for your car, your motorhome, if you've got one, or a boat or a generator, things like that. Go to empshield.com, read about it. Watch the videos about it. Watch the installation videos. You can do it yourself if you want. It installs like a Type 2 surge protector with just 4 wires, or you can have an electrician come out and knock it out for you in like 45 minutes. So take a look. empshield.com is the place to go. The link is in the description. If you find something you like, the discount code for that is macro, and it will definitely save you some money. Think about, there's bundle packages too. That'll bring the cost per unit down substantially over there at EMP Shield. And are you coming to Mexico? I mean, don't say I didn't invite you. I'm not trying to be like stingy or like a rude guest. And I get it. Not everyone can just hop on a plane and go to Mexico. But if you're available, February 11th through the 16th, Acapulco, Mexico, for Anarchapulco, the largest anarchist conference in the world, the 10th anniversary of that. Come out and see what's going on. It's the coolest conference you've ever been to. It's the baddest ass trade show you've ever seen. It's the Super Bowl of the alternative media. All the major COVID doctors will be there. All the crypto guys will be there. Every day is a different thing. And guess who's ringleading this whole thing? My dumb ass is. Yeah, I'll be the host and MC of the event this year. It's a big honor, I guess. I mean, it's an honor to me. I'm glad to be involved. I think it's an interesting event. It's always been the highlight of my week, that week has been the highlight of my year. So do this. Go to anarchapulco.com. The link is in the description. Read about it. See what you think. If you can't make it, but you still want to get all that information, you can just live stream it. Same thing applies. Use the promo code Macro. Save yourself some money. You can live stream it. You can watch it whenever you want. So let's move on to the business, shall we? Boy, if I were to rewrite my Octopus of Global Control book, I could probably go into a little bit more detail about this group that we're going to talk about because they're deeply involved. You know, I do talk about their crimes and quite a bit in the book. I just don't really give them the brand name that they go by. But there's a massive criminal network that was created by George H.W. Bush, and it was described by General Richard Secord, who is a member of the group, as being a 5,000-person criminal enterprise that had George H.W. Bush at the top as the CEO. Danny Casolaro had a name for it. You might recognize that. He called it the Octopus. And he wound up paying for it with his life, writing the book about that. But people that were in it, the people that were involved in it, they knew it as the Enterprise. And I want to talk to you a little bit about this because this is one of those criminal networks that is so massive that it is hidden because you just can't believe that something like this exists. You make all of the logical calculations in your brain that, no, surely if this was there, I would have heard about it. And even if I hadn't heard about it, somebody would have heard about it and they would have stopped it. There's no way you can run something this large without everybody knowing about it. You know, all of the things that run through your head as a way to sort of explain away what's going on here. It's all relevant. I mean, I did it too. You know, you want to pretend like it's not really there, but it's there. It's actually happening and it's really a thing. And if you were alive in the 80s and 90s, you saw things on the news that you maybe attributed to the American government, or maybe you attributed it to organized crime. And the irony is that you would be right in both cases. It's government organized crime, and it's 100% real. This is not some conspiracy theory. This is not some, you people with your idea, you're talking about these people that want world government and all that stuff. And you talk about this new world order. Well, show me the new world order. Where's the new world order? Well, would you like to know about the one component of the new world order? Well, if you listen to this episode, you're going to hear a little bit more about this. And what you're going to realize is that, oh shit, I know about those things. Wait a second. Who is in charge of this? I thought that was a standalone operation. Wait, what? Franklin's scandal? Running kids in from Omaha to wait, Lawrence E. King, Craig Spence? Yeah, I heard about that. That happened in the 80s, right? That pedophile and blackmail entrapment operation. Yeah, those guys were running that, weren't they? Yes. Do you know who they were working for? They worked for the Enterprise. And if it was a moneymaker and illegal, then they were not only into it, they were probably running the American version of it, the American franchise of it. So I want to talk a little bit about this. So you think of all of the crimes that you can get involved in as a gangster. You might be into drugs. Maybe you're burning down flower shops and collecting insurance money. Maybe you're into that. Maybe you're into selling guns out of the trunk of your car on the east side. Maybe you're running that scam that, what's his name? The mob guy, Michael Francesi, was running in Jersey with the oil, the gas station taxes. He was doing a thing with gas station taxes, getting it in one jurisdiction and marking it up, and making millions and millions of dollars in oil and gas fraud. Maybe you were, maybe you were buying land that was zoned a certain way and getting a dirty politician to rezone it in a more favorable, more valuable way, and you were committing real estate fraud that way. Maybe you were front-running trades, or you were blackmailing executives into giving you detailed information so that you could get out in front of a massive merger that was going to happen on Wall Street, and you could make a 16% more money, more on your investment because you knew what was coming. Whatever it was your specialty in the mafia, what I want to say is that the enterprise was doing all of it, and they were doing it way better than you were with your little shitty gang that you were running out of wherever you are. These people were professionals. These people were smart. And don't let the three-piece suit fool you. They murdered a lot of people that got in their way. They were deeply involved in drug trafficking. They were involved in oil and gas fraud. They were involved in real estate fraud. They were one of the major arms traffickers in the world. They were running savings and loan fraud in the 80s. Remember the savings and loan collapse? That was the enterprise. They were running insurance fraud. They were running securities fraud. They were running HUD fraud. Remember the HUD fraud that Catherine Austin Fitts talked about? That's the enterprise. That's who's involved in this. So I asked the question, think of it like this. Let's say you're a very rich, very powerful person with absolutely a broken moral compass. There isn't a line in the sand that you won't cross. I ask you this question. What would you do if you knew you could never get busted? Because that's the way these people operated. And part of the reason why they thought that they would never get busted is because they controlled not just a dirty cop here and there, not just the head of this union or the head of this police force or the mayor of this podunk town or the county commissioner of this place, Shitville, USA, or whatever. No. These people, they controlled the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Agency, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms industry. I mean, they ran these agencies, these American government agencies that are put in place to protect crime. I was going to say protect you from crime, but really they're put there to protect criminal, organized crime that runs America. But, you think of the FBI as like, oh, they're out there getting the bad guys. No, they're run by the bad guys. When I say that the FBI is the largest domestic terrorist organization operating in America, I'm not kidding. I'm not being like hyperbolic with that. It's what they are. The Drug Enforcement Agency was deeply involved in running drugs. It's like, take everything and invert it. Securities and Exchange Commission was deeply involved. They knew who Bernie Madoff was. They knew who Stephen Hoffenberg and Jeffrey Epstein were. They worked with them. The people that were at the head of the SEC that could have brought charges against these people were working for the enterprise. Okay? So you don't do that. You allow it to happen. The reason why you're the head of the SEC, FBI, DEA, and ATF isn't because you're a good guy. It's because you are a proven bad guy. That's how it works. You have to strip away any of these preconceived ideas that you have about how the American government is supposed to run. How it's supposed to run and how it actually runs are two different things. It is a criminal enterprise. And of course, that's why the name was chosen. This is, if you want to think of it differently, we talk about the Rockefeller Foundation and we talk about the Carnegie Foundation and we understand what these multi-generational trillionaire families do. They get a hold of things. They start to build their own group of companies and contacts and people that owe them money, people that they just outright blackmail and control. And you build yourself a crime family. And the enterprise is essentially the Bush crime family. But everyone thinks when you say Bush, you're talking about George W. Bush. George W. Bush isn't in charge of making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches inside his own administration. He was fucking retarded, okay? He's not in charge of anything. His old man, though, was one of the most dangerous people of the 20th century, George H.W. Bush. And of course, his father, Prescott Bush, was financing Adolf Hitler through Brown Brothers Harriman. Not a speculation, not wild random conspiracy theory, not slander. They almost hanged him for his role. The reason why they didn't was because Prescott Bush was the head of the USO, and they thought it would be a really bad look and difficult to explain if the head of the USO was hanging from a lamppost somewhere. He should have been, but they thought that people would say, well, why is this happening? USO, that's, that's supposed to be like support the troops, bring the boys home, all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. Well, how come you're killing that guy? Oh, well, that guy was actually a banker that was sending money to Germany for years and years and years. Oh, by the way, the Soviet Union as well. He financed Bolshevism. But the money that was being used by Germany to buy the planes and the oil that they needed, the oil additives that helped the Luftwaffe fly, was sold to them by the Rockefellers. The money that was coming in was being provided by the Ford Foundation, by Brown Brother Harriman, which Prescott Bush was running. I mean, the Nazi regime wouldn't have gotten off the ground if it hadn't have been for American industry. That's a fact. And American banking. It's just a fact. I'm sorry. Everyone wants to say, oh, America's the good guy. They came in, man. They saved us from the Nazis. Dude, they could have saved you from the Nazis if the Rockefellers had decided not to sell them the fuel additive for the Luftwaffe. Their planes wouldn't have been flying. So stop with America came in and saved the day. America parachuted in on the last year of the war, did mop-up duty, and let the Russians win the war. If we're being honest. And I'm an American. I should, want to take credit for this, but that would be disingenuous and dishonest, because the truth of the matter is that the Soviet Union won World War II, not America. Sorry. And I say that as an American, but just to let the record reflect that. And again, it wouldn't have happened without Bush, Prescott Bush, Skull and Bones, then his son, George H.W. Bush, Skull and Bones, then George W. Bush, Skull and Bones. You understand. So secret societies are strong with these people. And if you think about the Bush crime family, don't think of it as W. Bush. Don't think of it as his crime family. His crime family would be the Keystone Cops. They'd be running into each other and all that stuff. It's more than that. And it started back with Prescott Bush. It started back in the 30s. Okay. So it's been around for a long, long time. So, and when, in every Prescott Bush's empire alone would have been pretty massive. But then you take George H.W. Bush's and put that on top of it. And we're talking about his, building upon this foundation with China, with Bush's Rockefeller, Kissinger, China opportunity in the early 70s when they opened up China. I've mentioned this before, that like when those meetings ended and they had, quote, opened up China, meaning renormalized relations with China after 22 years. One of the things that happened was that the manufacturing capacity of China that was decided to take a much larger role. And they said, what Mao wanted to do in his great leap was get everyone out of the fields and into the cities. And Rockefeller, Kissinger, and Bush helped facilitate that by bringing in Chase Bank. They said, well, we've got money for you. You need money to grow. We can help you grow. But we're going to need access to these factories that you're talking about. So the word on the street was that after that meeting left, George H.W. Bush had already started the process of opening 5,000 factories inside China. Now, it sounds like a lot, obviously. Maybe it didn't turn out to be that, but that's the word. That's what I've read. So you understand that they're not going to just open China to do nothing with it, right? Much like everything that they do. They don't put in the time and effort and use their connections and threaten people and make this happen if they don't have a plan. And the plan is turn China into the manufacturing warehouse facility of the planet. Oh, and by the way, let's get ourselves a couple manufacturing facilities over there. So that's what they did. And so listen, I mean, let's ask the question. If we're talking about World War II coming to an end, and we're talking about how that war wrapped up. We know about Operation Paperclip. You go, boy, sure are a lot of Nazis being relocated to the West. Bunch of scientists. There's some were relocated to Russia as well. But America got the ones that if a German scientist had to choose where to go, America or Russia, they were going to America. If it was up to them, they were going. Now, I don't know. The Soviet Union might have had different thoughts on how they got their people, but they took some as well. But those Nazi paperclip scientists didn't just go to America and put them in a retirement home. They put them to work, and they gave them really high-level jobs. We know about them starting NASA, being deeply involved. Wernher von Braun from the V2 program coming to the United States, working on NASA, and being involved in all of that. So I think the question should be asked, Germany lost World War II, but did the Nazis? Really? I mean, because it seems to me like they changed out of their SS gear into lab coats and three-piece suits, because those guys went to work at Los Alamos, and they went to work for NASA. The hell, they created NASA. They went to work in all of our sensitive facilities because they were really great at what they did. So in some ways, the Enterprise is the Fourth Reich. It took a lot of those people. It took a lot of the ideology from that. Bush's version of the New World Order. You heard H.W. Bush. Remember when he was president from 88 to 92. That's 4 years. And in the 4 years on camera, he mentioned on 200 different counted occasions, he mentioned the term New World Order. So he's a Rockefeller guy in that class. And when he was opening up China, he was the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, which of course is a Rockefeller front company. So he was a Rockefeller guy. And when you talk about the New World Order, we know what that is. That's the world government that the Rockefellers control. But within that New World Order, it's not all homogenous. There are factions within that. And within that New World Order, the Bush family had their faction. And that is the Enterprise. And, but there, it's not to say that there was necessarily infighting. Do your thing. Do what you need to do, George, and the Enterprise. Do what you need to do. But just don't forget what we're working on here is a world government. And what I'm going to need you to do is, sure, you can make $1 trillion doing all these other side deals. And please do, because we're going to need the money. But don't lose sight of the fact that we're trying to create a world government here, and we're going to need your help. So don't for a second confuse that George H.W. Bush, he was busy. He had many jobs while he was the vice president of the United States and then later president in 88 to 92. He was also running the Enterprise, and he was also working for the Rockefellers, and he was also working for the Carlyle Group and these other components. So this is all part of the family. But if you think about it, there's really no difference. There's no difference between what Bush was doing and what Rockefeller is with his United Nations. Same ideology, ruthless psychopaths, dark energy people, secret societies, skull and bones, all that stuff. There's a lot of overlap between what the Bushes were involved in, what the Rockefellers were. Bohemian Grove's role, let's not discount that. The Bush family had their own cottage there. We'll get into that in a little bit. They ran, Bush ran the CIA in the 70s. He's a made man in the intel community, 100%. Top of the food chain. Remember hearing those stories about when he was the head of the CIA and Jimmy Carter coming in and saying, like, I want to be read in on the UFO file. And Bush is like, you don't have clearance for that. He's like, I'm the president of the United States. I don't give a fuck who you are. You don't have clearance for that. I'm not telling you anything. So, listen, George H.W. Bush had access to the UFO file. Don't discount that. I know it's tempting to be like, oh, all that talk about the UFO stuff in the news. Yeah, that's bullshit. Okay, that's a disinformation campaign. But the UFO component and the UFO file, what MJ12 was talking about, and what these guys have been hiding away, very few people have access to that. Very few people would really know about that. George H.W. Bush would be one of those people that would have been read in on this, more than likely. Head of the CIA, not just that, deep banking ties, obviously the intelligence community. So he's and a murderous thug too. I mean, George H.W. Bush would have you blown up in an airplane immediately if he thought that would further his career or silence you. So let's think about this. All right, let's talk about the Bush family, kind of how this comes about around to being, because it didn't happen overnight. This group was put together over decades, but once it was in power, it really kind of was the octopus that Danny Castellero was writing about. So imagine all of Prescott Bush's money. The money he had from the Harriman clan, the money they made on World War II. I mean, how do you measure that? A lot of money. Money, power, the destruction of your competition, the understanding of now the US dollar takes shape as the world's reserve currency, starting off as a gold-backed currency, then that falling away in 1971, and then this push to just turn the dollar into a fiat trash can, of just worthless bills, which they're on their way to doing. But you take all of the money that Prescott Bush had, and then you take all of George H.W. Bush's CIA, vice president, president, Rockefeller connections, and you add that on top of this. And then he goes on to use his sons, George W. Bush and Neil Bush and Jeb and all the Bush dipshits that are out there running around. And he uses them to run various operations, including 9/11. Not that W. Bush was involved. Not that W. Bush was running 9/11. Let me be very clear. George H.W. Bush and his group were definitely involved in that. If you go back to the 9/11 episode I put out called The 5 Masterminds of 9/11, we do a little deep dive in, I shouldn't say, we do a medium dive into a very shadowy right-leaning group called Les Cercles, which translates to the circle in English from French. And Les Cercles was most definitely involved in 9/11. And so was the Enterprise. And if we're talking about the Venn diagram of evil, there is a whole lot of overlap between these groups. And we'll get into that as well. So the Bush family comes in, they've got Prescott with the money, H.W. Bush with the influence and the real murderous mentality. I mean, George H.W. Bush was a cold-blooded killer and definitely involved in, you think the Clintons have a body count. You ain't seen nothing yet. I mean, the Clintons are amateurs when it comes to the Bush family body count. And, well, speaking of that, after George H.W. Bush loses the re-election in 92 to Clinton, we start to see things go a different direction, sort of a new generation. But speaking of Clinton, he was initiated into the Enterprise shortly after being identified as a Rhodes Scholar in that program in the UK, which he is taught to by the Cecil Rhodes Roundtable Group, how to be an infiltrator of America and how to destroy it from the inside. And by all accounts, Bill Clinton has been very effective at destroying America from the inside. I mean, NAFTA alone would have been worth the amount of money that they invested in him. What that did to the manufacturing capacity of the United States. Funny, it outsourced it all to China, which is where the Bushes had all their facilities. I'm sure that was just a giant coincidence. He was installed, we're talking now of Clinton. We go a little bit into his background before he became the president. He was installed as a dirty governor of Arkansas, and he was in charge of running the cocaine importation and logistics for the Enterprise into Mena, Arkansas. So the way it worked is that the cocaine would come up from South America. It would usually stop several places along the way, Central America, Bahamas, wherever, refuel, and then make its way to Mena, Arkansas, where it was offloaded there. And Bill Clinton and his group of state police would make sure that it was then taken from the Mina airport and distributed where it needed to go. And if you got in the way of Bill Clinton, he would have you murdered. And that is how you make your bones in the enterprise, is that you keep the drugs flowing and you keep the mouths shut. And if you start to talk about it, they blow up your airplane or they shoot you twice in the head and get their dirty coroner to come in and say it was self-inflicted, because that's how you do it. But see, Bill Clinton really proved himself during the 80s by doing this, by allowing the drugs to come in. Now, this is part of the Iran-Contra affair. I don't want to go into too much. I don't want to turn it into too much of a history lesson on that. But you've seen, and this isn't like hidden. You can go watch the Tom Cruise movie where he plays Barry Seal, and it's like, American Made is the name of the movie. You can go find it. It's like, hey, it's Tom Cruise. He's playing Barry Seal. Like, well, Barry Seal was a CIA agent, and Barry Seal was definitely running cocaine for the enterprise, and he was running it into Mena, Arkansas, and Bill Clinton was taking over from there. These aren't opinions. These are facts. These are facts of the case. This isn't debatable anymore. It might have been debatable in the 80s. People might have said you were crazy for pointing that out, or if you had too loud of a voice, you'd have 2 bullet holes in you. But for people that are analyzing this now, after the fact, it's not debatable. This is clearly proven. Go read Sean Atwood's books on it. He's done a great job, a tremendous job on detailing all of this. This is what was going on. And so, this was enough. This audition period, this partnership of Clinton Bush in the 80s was enough for George H.W. Bush to feel pretty comfortable in 92 to say, that's fine if I lose. Either heads, I win and go into presidency for a second term. Tails, I lose and my underling becomes president, and I get to go off without the spotlight and go do whatever I want, like Plan 9/11. So this is what happens when you lose the election in 92 and you're George H.W. Bush. It's not a crushing defeat. You lost the election to your business partner, and I'm sure he was fine. This is a reward for a job well done. Bill Clinton wasn't the president of the United States because he played saxophone on Arsenio Hall. He was the president of the United States because the enterprise said so. It's just the way it was going to be. This was his reward for the coke running and for keeping his mouth shut and for blowing up the right people and for silencing anybody that ever spoke out against him. And so anyway, this, it goes back to the Iran-Contra stuff. And basically the short version of that is arms deal run by the enterprise. That whole Iran-Contra, when you start to see like Ollie North and John Poindexter and Felix Hernandez, or was it Felix Hernandez? Let me make sure I got his name, Felix Rodriguez. All these guys, and you start to go like, oh yeah, I remember hearing about that. Brent Scrowcroft and Donald Rumsfeld and Richard. Oh yeah, that's Iran-Contra. Yeah, I think I remember hearing about that when I was a kid. And those guys were all like, what were they, like rogue CIA agents? Were they government? Sort of. They were all guys that worked for the enterprise. That was a Bush operation, Iran-Contra. And Nicaragua's anti-communist rebels were known as the Contras, the Enterprise's regime change army, right? That's what they wanted to do. This is a sort of like what Bush did with the Enterprise is really kind of like privatize. It was his own version of the CIA. He would take guys from the CIA that would come and work with him on this, and then they would regime change people. That's what they were doing in Nicaragua, is that they were trying to regime change the current administration there by running guns into them. But the way they needed to pay for the guns was they couldn't go to Congress to get the money because that's illegal. So what they did was they said, well, let's partner up with our guys in South America with all the coke. Bring the coke into Arkansas. And then once the coke's in Arkansas, we'll distribute it all over the place there. Then the proceeds from that, the money we make from that, we can partner up with the Israelis and get weapons from them, and then they can send them into Nicaragua. Or we can do it too. Like we can fly we'll fly the coke in and the guns out. You know what I mean? Like, why not be efficient with these trips? We got to go back and forth, right? With no sense dead legging it with nothing in the back of your plane. Why don't we just load it up with we load it up with money? We take it to the offshore banks and do that, and we could load it up with guns, and we could drop those off in Nicaragua, and then refill with cocaine, and just go back and forth and back and forth, and we could do this for a decade. And that, of course, is what they did. This is why they made a fortune doing this. And if you've ever hear them talk about, Bill Clinton is on the record saying this one time. He said that there is a government outside of the government, and I do not control that. When he's talking about that, this is the group he's talking about. When Daniel Inouye talks about there is a private group out there that has its own army, its own funding mechanism, he's talking about the enterprise. When he's making that quote in the late 80s, when Bill Clinton is installed as president, and and they're like, why can't you do this, Bill? You're the president. He's like, I am the president of this government, but there is another government that I don't control. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? This is what he's talking about. You can't come right out and say, well, George H.W. Bush has set up a secret government that runs in the shadows, that's staffed with all these people that used to work in the legitimate government, all the bad guys from the legitimate government that we either installed because they were bad guys, or we turned them from good guys into bad guys, and now they have no choice but to be bad guys because you can't go back. Blood in, blood out, as they say. So this is that secret government that's sort of behind. Now, this is a government might be too broad a term, because there's no voting going on. It's a mafia. It's more like the Bush mafia. I don't know. However you want to. It's Bush's splintered private CIA, if you want to look at it like that. The enterprise that runs the white collar criminal underworld. Okay, that would be this group. That's probably Saudi money to finance it. A lot of Saudi money came in through Bandar Bush. He was the pipeline. Quite literally, the pipeline to the royals in Saudi Arabia. That petrodollar arrangement that Kissinger hammered out on behalf of ostensibly on behalf of the American government, but really it was a Rockefeller op from the beginning. So Bush is involved in this as well, because he's watching this petrodollar arrangement come out and happen during the early 70s while he's running the CIA. He's keeping an eye on this. His relationship with the Saudis, both in Texas and in Saudi Arabia, well known. Nothing that anybody would dispute. And they also had a role in Afghanistan in the 80s as well. You know about that as the Soviet Union came in, very, very tail end of last couple days of 1979. Were in Afghanistan for a decade until they got kind of bogged down in that war, and then kind of led to the breakup of the Soviet Union in some regards. Well, you ever wonder, we've heard about the heroin flowing. It was flowing, and then it wasn't, and then it was. Well, KBR, which is a subsidiary, Kellogg Brown and Root, it's a subsidiary of Halliburton. They were the ones that built the Bagram Air Force Base there. And that Bagram Air Force Base is the Air Force Base that is the largest distribution hub of heroin in the world. It flows through that base. So this idea that the United States is in Afghanistan to spread freedom and democracy is preposterous. It is a distribution logistics hub for heroin. That's what it is. That's what it's always been. It's the, centerpiece of Eurasia, the focal point of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East coming together. It's an unconquerable territory. And it also happens to be one of the few places in the world where you can grow poppy at the altitudes needed, in the temperatures needed, and that's where it grows. And if you think for a second that the enterprise wasn't involved in that, you're wrong, because they most definitely were. In fact, that KBR Halliburton connection comes in handy too, because who the CEO of Halliburton went on to later be was Dick Cheney. So when you need the multinational engineering firm CEO, you've got it. When you talk about these massive corporations and their relationship with the federal government of the United States, the international government of the world governments, it brings you right back to John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, where he talks about working for a company called Maine, which was like Halliburton in the 60s and 70s, and working for them at the behest of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. So these things are this idea that it's like, oh, it's a Wall Street company, I could buy stock in it, maybe it'll go up. It's like, these people are the government. And the privatization component of this is something that the enterprise was definitely involved in. So where you could take a guy from a private company like a Dick Cheney, put him in the Nixon administration with Rumsfeld, and have him cook there, take him out in the 80s, let him run Halliburton in the 80s and 90s, and then install him back as the vice president in 2000 to oversee the 9/11 operation, and then that global war that's going to start, of all places, in Afghanistan, where Halliburton had their base, and start doing that again, because we've got to get the drugs flowing. The fucking enterprise tells us so. We need that. That is part of their revenue stream. So it's very important to understand the role of drug trafficking in this. This idea that George H.W. Bush is like, we're gonna start it, just say no to drugs campaign and everything. Do shut the fuck up. Stop with that. You're embarrassing yourself if you think that these presidents, and Nancy Reagan's like, just say no. Your vice president, the guy who tried to murder your husband, your vice president is running the largest drug trafficking enterprise on the entire planet. So shut the fuck up about just say no. Okay, stop it. National Security Council Ollie North was a top guy for the enterprise, and he ran their regime change operations that they fucked up and got exposed for the Iran-Contra. That's why you saw him standing up, putting his hand up, and solemnly swearing in front of a court that he definitely didn't know what was going on, even though he did. It'll get you a show on Fox, which is what Ollie North has now. Now he's a hero. People think he's a hero. You should probably read your history books. Let's talk about the Reagan years. Ronald Reagan did not trust George H.W. Bush, and with good reason, too. I mean, see, Reagan mistakenly thought that he was the president and that George H.W. Bush worked for him. And but that Bush family connected John Hinckley sent him a message within his first couple of months in office that, in fact, it's the other way around, and you're lucky that we were a millimeter away from your heart, or else you'd be in Arlington and our guy would be the new president in 1981. Didn't really go down that way, but I think the message was sent one way or another to Ronald Reagan. Comply or die. That should be on the Bush family crest. So Reagan was selected at Bohemian Grove. We know this. He was selected by Laserkel while he was there back in the 70s. They'd made the decision that he was going to be the late 70s. He was going to be the guy. The Bush family has had a cabin at Bohemian Grove for forever. And that is where they planned for Reagan to become the face of the country. He's an actor, after all. He looks good. People like him. People recognize him. They he's kind of witty. He's quick with a joke and a smile. Well, and people kind of like Ronald Reagan. Nobody liked George H.W. Bush. Remember, they thought he was a wimp. He would say, I'm the vice president, and I don't have to eat my broccoli if I don't want to. And everyone's like, what's wrong with you? Why are you so much of a tremendous pussy? Well, George H.W. Bush loved that. If you were a super spy like him, you would love for people to think of you one way, but for you to actually be another. He embraced the wimp. You remember that was the knock on Bush, was that he was a wimp. He was a wimp that refused to eat his broccoli. George H.W. Bush was a murderous thug who would blow you up in an airplane just as easily as he would order dessert at dinner. I mean, no second thoughts or anything. That's just how things got done. And so Reagan became the face of the administration. He got all the notoriety But the deal was you have to put George H.W. Bush on as your vice president, and Reagan didn't want to do that. And then they explained to him, no, you see, we will be selecting your cabinet. We will be filling out the stable of people in your administration. We are making sure that we put our guy in there to keep an eye on you. And that's George H.W. Bush. He's going to be your vice president, or you're not going to be president. That's the deal. And he never liked him. Don't blame him. Never trusted him. I tried to kill him after that. I mean, we understand why. But once Reagan was installed as president, then all of the guardrails were installed as well in the form of a brownstone operation that would be set up in order to make sure that nobody got outside of the areas that were acceptable. Nobody started talking about things that they weren't supposed to talk about. Nobody started mentioning the enterprise. Nobody talked about the drug running. Nobody talked about any of that. And in order to make sure that you've got these politicians, special interest guys, CEOs, bankers, whatever, you've got media executives, to make sure that you've got them right where you want them, you would need to get them involved into you'd need to get an insurance policy to make sure that they didn't ever get on the wrong side of you. And of course, that insurance policy is known to the world as the Franklin scandal. So you've heard of Craig Spence, you've heard of Lawrence King, you might have seen the headlines of the front page of the Washington Times. You can find this headline wherever. You can just type this in and search it. The headline of that paper, the newspaper, Washington Times is no longer a publication, but it said, homosexual prostitution inquiry ensnares VIPs with Reagan, Bush. That was the Franklin scandal. And those are the guardrails that make sure that people don't get outside of that. Whistleblowers plane, the whistleblower who exposed the Franklin scandal, yeah, their plane blew up with them and their family in it. Okay. But you've got the DC Madam, you've got Lawrence King, who's bringing in boys from Boys Town, literally called Boys Town, the charity in Omaha, Lincoln, Nebraska, I think, Lincoln or Omaha, one of those places, and flying them in, talk about $65,000 pizza party coming out of Chicago. I mean, it's the same thing. That's essentially what this was. So the entrapment operation that they were running was one of a homosexual nature that involved boys for homosexual men that were in politics or positions of power that liked boys. And they would get them in compromising situations like Epstein was doing. This is known as a brownstone operation. It would be very useful in the Reagan White House, and it was being run by George H.W. Bush's enterprise. So there's a lot going on, but just so you know, that's how you get the control file on a lot of people. That doesn't work for everybody. First of all, you'd have to be a homosexual and you'd have to be a pedophile. But again, it's not that going to Washington, D.C. and getting into politics turns you into a homosexual and a pedophile. It's that they recruit the people that are homosexuals, pedophiles. And I'm not trying to say that all homosexuals are pedophiles, just to be clear. But in this particular operation, they needed those two things. Because in the 80s, still, being gay was like, we're talking about the era of AIDS coming out. It wasn't a good look. And it wasn't a good look to, I mean that from a political standpoint. You're trying to appeal to as many voters as you can. And if you are something that is a little less than, you're gay, and maybe you're coming out of, South Dakota, and everyone's like, I'm not going to be voting for any of them homosexuals up in here, then you don't have a chance. So you have to be closeted. So whereas now, like the gay component probably wouldn't be a big deal, the pedophilia component certainly would be. Although these days it seems as though even that's kind of going away, but whatever. If you could get a gay pedophile on camera with a boy that you have flown across state lines to engage in to engage in illegal sex with somebody, you are going away forever if you get caught. So don't get caught. And how do you make sure that you don't get caught? Well, you make sure that the guys that have the tapes on you don't ever have a problem with you. So you got to do what they want you to do. And that's kind of how this works. Now, William Casey, remember, if you remember he's the guy that has the quote that says, "We'll know our disinformation campaign has been successful when everything that the general public believes is false." That William Casey, well, so he becomes the head of the CIA when Reagan is president and Bush is vice president. They bring him in, Reagan's immediately shot, and the message has been sent that there is a coup inside the palace and that George H.W. Bush is now in charge. From that moment on, it was clear to Reagan, you work for him, not the other way around. You think you might be the president, and the general public might think you're the president, and you may go out there and do all the speeches, but you are not in charge. The other guy is in charge. You know, the wimp that won't eat his broccoli? The wimp will blow your airplane up. So you better do what he said. So while Reagan LARPed as being the president, the real power was being consolidated by Bush through the Saudis, through the Rockefellers, through Brown Brother Harriman, through those fortunes that were used by the enterprise in a variety of ways, none of which were legal. Okay, so they take the money that they already have and use that to finance these scams that they're running, all of these, all of the insurance fraud and oil and gas fraud, the real estate fraud, and all this stuff, all that stuff that happened in the 80s, the savings and loan fraud. They're like, how did all these banks go bust? It was fraud. Well, how did we not know about this? We did. You just weren't paying attention. We were, but the rest of the world was. I don't know. So this is part of where the seed money came from this, for a lot of it from opening up China. That was a huge component of this when it left all these factories just churning out products and making them a lot of money. But here's the thing. You can make all the money in the world, but if you don't have a bank that you can run it through, well, then you're not going to really go too far. So what they did was that they said, we need to figure out a way to open up a bank and have this bank work for us on all of our dealings and have it look like a bank and quack like a bank, but not actually be the sort of bank that you would think it would be. And of course, the bank that the enterprise wound up starting is called BCCI, otherwise known as Bank for Crooks and Criminals International. It was well known that that's what they were doing. It was quite literally a bank started to launder money. I mean, it wasn't like, we're going to make money on IRAs and piggy banks and 401ks, and we're going to open checking accounts for teenagers that want to come in. There was none of it. I mean, they had some of that as like window dressing. They weren't making money. I'm sure they would probably put mannequins in there if they could. But there was a little bit of window dressing for BCCI, but the vast majority of it was happening offshore. In fact, it should have, if they were smart and not greedy, which they were smart, but definitely greedy, they would have never even brought that bank onshore in America, because even though these guys had control of basically the entire United States government, they didn't have control of every single person. And some people started digging into BCCI, and it turned out to be a real headache. And they eventually put that bank out of business. And of course, nobody really went to prison. Some low-level guys. And we've talked about BCCI before, but just understand, when you hear that name and you go, oh yeah, that bank was started by what, like a Pakistani guy and somebody, and you go, yeah. Who instructed them to start that bank? The enterprise did. You need the bank. We have to have the bank. And that's who was involved in this. So, listen, they didn't stay in business long enough to launder $1 trillion, though they would have if the Scooby-Doo crew hadn't discovered the dirtiest bank the CIA had ever conceived of. I mean, a bank so dirty that it was financing Osama bin Laden. But of course, that wouldn't be a surprise to anybody that knew who was actually running the bank, because the bin Laden family and the Bush family have had a very long history. And when when BCCI was financing Osama bin Laden, that was when he was a good guy. That's when he was Tim Osman, CIA asset, running the Mujahideen in Afghanistan and fighting back the evil Soviet Union. So that's when he was on our side before he later became the boogeyman that took down 3 buildings with 2 airplanes from guys that didn't know how to fly. But besides that, so this is so not only did they launder money through BCCI, but when the heat came and people started looking at that bank, the money vanished. And between 10 and $15 billion was stolen from that bank by the enterprise. So when Daniel Inouye is talking about, there's this shadowy government that has its own funding mechanism and has all the money in the world and all that, 15 billion is not all the money in the world. But you just have to understand, this is just one of the scams. We're not even talking about all the real estate stuff. We're not even talking about the cocaine. We're just on the bank alone. This was enough money to finance tons of operations, and this is the bank that they used to bankroll terrorism. What they define as terrorism, in order to help boost the need for their defense company holdings that they had as well. So, you own a lot of stock in Lockheed Martin. It doesn't do you much good unless there's a bunch of wars going on that need the products that Lockheed Martin builds. So what if you owned a bunch of MIC stock, military industrial complex connected companies, the stock on all of them, but then you were also in charge of foreign policy for the U.S. government? You could start the wars that would benefit the holdings that you have and all these. So they did. Of course, they did all of that. And, create the enemy and then charge the public to hire you to fight against it. That's essentially what they were doing. It's genius, of course, but diabolical. So during the since I mentioned the Soviet Union on several occasions here when we're talking about like destabilizing the Soviet Union via Afghanistan as one way, sort of drain their resources, get them in this unwinnable war in Afghanistan. God, who would have ever thought that the American empire, would get dragged into an unwinnable war in Afghanistan that took twice as long? If I didn't know any better, I'd think they were trying to destroy this empire the way they were the Soviet Union. Oh, wait. Yes, of course. So, but during the 80s, the enterprise was really focused on flipping KGB generals, KGB agents, and high-ranking KGB agents and generals that were in the Soviet military. So this is while the enterprise still had control of the CIA. They would prioritize this. They would say, "Let's get these KGB guys that we know that are inside there, that are loyal to us. Actually, let's flip them." And then, we'll tell them something like, you work for us now or else we'll out you to your government and they'll blow you up. So you'd get these guys who go, yeah, I have no loyalty necessarily to the Soviet Union. I'll work with you, but what's in it for me? Well, what's in it for you is that when this place breaks apart, we'll make sure that you're still standing, like Elton John. You know what I mean? And once the Soviet Union did break apart, these Bush-financed generals would take over large segments of the Russian economy. And you would probably know these guys because they are what's known today as the Russian oligarchs. The reason why those guys are in positions of power is because the enterprise put them there back in the 80s. They identified them as people that would work with them. They then broke apart the Soviet Union, but kept their guys running that industry. Because if you want to corner the potash industry in Russia or the nickel industry in Russia, put your guy in charge of it and then have him pay tribute to you as a, franchise fee to the enterprise for putting you in this position. And of course, that's what happened. Installed the enterprise mafia of Russia. So when you see these guys and you look into their backgrounds, what you'll find is that they had loyalties elsewhere. That's the reason why they're still alive. That's the reason why they are allowed to, they were allowed to rise to positions of power, because they had protection. In a destabilized Soviet Union that was falling apart with power vacuums everywhere, you needed to know somebody would have your back if you decided to take over an industry. And in this particular case, the people that had their back inside the Soviet Union for taking over these Russian industries were in fact not Russians, but Americans. It was the Bush family's connections. It was the enterprise that was backing this. They were the ones that were watching this. They were the ones that were making it happen. Of course, they knew that they needed these guys because they knew what they were doing. And Soros comes in and works, fucks with them on the currency side of things and starts to destabilize them that way. The Soviet Union gets involved in Afghanistan through the Mujahideen, keeps them bogged down there, fighting an unwinnable war, and then you start the process of perestroika. You start the process of trying to compromise guys like Gorbachev, who's a globalist, and then you take over, find a functional alcoholic in Boris Yeltsin, install him, and then watch the whole thing come down. And when it comes down, you've got to move quick. You've got to have a plan for day one when it comes down. And that's what they did. That's what the enterprise did, was that they had their guys, these ex-KGB generals, that were all sort of standing off to the side waiting. And as soon as it happened, and as soon as the Soviet Union fell, these guys came running in there with the backing of Bush to do all of this. Now, of course, Bush knew this was going to happen because the whole time they were destabilizing the Soviet Union, he was the vice president of the United States. And not coincidentally, when the Soviet Union did fall, George H.W. Bush was the president of the United States. So imagine this, the president of the United States, not just cheerleading on the fall of the Soviet Union, but also covertly stealing as much of the money out of it personally as he can through his criminal enterprise that was set up waiting on the sidelines for the dust to settle so that they could go in there and take control of this. I mean, you almost have to appreciate the audacity of this piece of shit. I mean, he really had big plans for things. And remember, I want you to remember this. Bush knows how to open up markets and industries through his time in the 70s with the Rockefellers and Kissingers inside Chairman Mao's closed marketplace of China. So Bush knew how to open a closed marketplace. They'd done it with China in the 70s. They did it again with the Soviet Union in the 90s, and he was running that operation as well. Let's wrap up with this. Let's talk about some of the members of this group, the Enterprise, because, I don't want to just leave it as some, octopus with tentacles, as they say. But let's escape from mere generalizations and point the fingers at some of these scumbags that were involved. Let's start with Richard Armitage, Vietnam guy, Deputy Secretary of State under George W. Bush, when Colin Powell was holding up the yellow cake uranium and at the National Security Council presentation, that bullshit marketing job he did where he talked about how they found aluminum tubes, and you know what that's used for? Fuck, I don't know. Moving water from one place to, I don't know. Tell me what are aluminum tubes? Well, nuclear war, of course. We have to go into Iraq and get them. Well, the guy that was one notch below Colin Powell, not Secretary of State, but Deputy Secretary of State, was Richard Armitage. He's a Project for a New American Century scumbag, and he was deeply involved with the planning of 9/11. Oliver North, Iran-Contra. He was a drug runner. He was a gun runner, and he is a murderous thug. If you want to know who was behind Oklahoma City bombing, you would look at the Enterprise. If you want to know who had Terrence Yankee murdered, you would look at Ollie North and his crew that did that. That is from a source I will not disclose that had very good information about who murdered Terrence Yankee, the cop who saved people from Oklahoma City and then tried to blow the whistle on it, but was later killed. Richard Secord was a member. He's a major general in Laos and the Vietnam bombing campaigns, so you know he can be trusted because we weren't supposed to be bombing Laos, and yet there we were. He made $2 million on the Iran-Contra affair, got busted, and didn't see any prison time for it because he's above the law. And now he is deeply involved in extracting oil out of Azerbaijan. John Poindexter is a member of this. He's a national security advisor. Donald Gregg is a member of the Enterprise. He was Operation 40. He's a member of the Operation 40 Cuban assassination squads. He's a member of the CFR. He was a high-ranking guy at Goldman Sachs. He was deeply involved in Iran-Contra when the plane carrying all the coke got shot down by the Sandinistas and nobody knew where it was and the phone calls were going all over the place. Donald Gregg was the one that was blowing up everybody's phone. Where the fuck is this airplane? Well, he was a pedophile that was being blackmailed by these guys, but it probably didn't stop him from wanting to work with them. Felix Rodriguez, I mentioned, he ran the Mexican portion of Iran-Contra and West Central America, really, but Mexico in particular. Operation 40 Hitman. He was involved in Air America, all of that good stuff. So distribution, logistics for the enterprise cartel that was running it through Central and South America. He would be a man on the ground that would help out with that. Bill Clinton is a member of the enterprise, former U.S. president, founder of the Clinton Foundation. There's a thing or two about crime and pedophilia. Brent Scowcroft, Aspen Institute, CFR, Kissinger and Associates, Atlantic Council, RAND, dangerous guy. Donald Rumsfeld was a member of the enterprise, old Don. RAND, Monsanto. We cannot track $2.3 trillion of spending. That guy. So look, these are the guys that start the wars. Most of these guys are pretty high ranking in either the Reagan or Bush administration, sometimes both. Of course, Bill Clinton was his own administration. But these are the guys that start wars. So it only makes sense that they're deeply connected to arms trafficking surrounding wars. And of course they were. They make a fortune from this. This is a massive industry. They sold weapons to Iraq before invading it later. That's why when you see Donald Rumsfeld working for G.D. Searle and selling chemical weapons to Saddam Hussein and posing for that picture with him, it's like, how is this friendship taking place? This is a weird one. It's like, well, Rumsfeld's selling him chemical weapons on behalf of G.D. Searle, but he's also working for the enterprise while doing this. Oh, okay, well, that makes sense. These guys funded the Mujahideen in the 80s via Osama bin Laden, Tim Osman, CIA connection, the bin Laden family, Bush family, longtime partners. So there's that. There's Operation Hammer that was going on in LA. This is when Police Chief Daryl Gates was running this from 1987 to 1990, where it was like, anybody that looks like they might be a gang member, let's lock them up. Let's just, let's crash units and everything. Crash was an acronym. Of course it was an acronym. And coming in and busting down doors and putting people in the private prison industry that they were deeply involved in. The enterprise was deeply involved in running the private prison industry. I mean, you just look in Washington, D.C. for criminality and you find these guys. And of course, as I mentioned, Laserkel was very much represented within the enterprise, but that should come as a surprise to nobody because a lot of these names are members of that group. And of course, I think that group was involved in 9/11 in a very big way. This is, let's finish with this because if you're keeping a criminal enterprise like this going for as long as the Bushes did with this, you've got a lot of people that know about it. When you mention 5,000 person, when General Richard Secord describes it as a 5,000 person criminal enterprise, you can't keep all of it a secret. People know, people talk. So you've got to be very careful about who's talking, and you have to have the desire to tie up loose ends. And that is what happened. Estimates of the cleanup operation for the enterprise put the murders at somewhere around 400 people that were silenced in order to keep shut about this. We're talking mid-level managers at the enterprise. We're talking about reporters. We're talking about journalists that were murdered. We're talking about Danny Casolaro. We're talking about Gary Webb, among others. So when you hear these guys and you find out that they got whacked and you say, well, they were writing about all these drug trades going on. This is who they were writing about. This is the octopus. Makes you wonder what was in those envelopes that they were handing out at George H.W. Bush's funeral, doesn't it? Hey, if you like this episode, you can take the additional step right now of sharing it with your friends and family. Do you like the show? If you think we've earned 5 stars, I would appreciate it if you would just scroll down a little bit. You can just do it. Takes 2 seconds, write a little review. Thank you. I like the show. Sounds good. Love it. It doesn't matter to me, but it matters to the algorithm. So we'll play that game for as long as we have to. If you want to connect with me, the website is macroaggressions.io. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you again soon.